This is my confirmation Bible. I've shared this in the past, and I think that this is like a pretty common gift for Protestant Christians growing up in the 90s or the early 2000s. A lot of people had this one. It's got lots of crazy shit, honestly. And one of my core memories of being a young little gay kid is flipping to the back of this book and looking up some specific words. Flip, 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 flip. Gay? No. Flip, 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 flip. You don't have to flip it. It's right on the other page. Homosexuality? Oh boy, what does it have to say about that? I don't know. Let's see. Page 140. Oh no, that's early. That's Leviticus. It's not going to be good, y'all. It's not going to be good. All right, the first passage about homosexuality comes from Leviticus 18, unlawful sexual relations. And actually, we get the Bible says here at the bottom, only one right choice. Alternative lifestyle, with quotation marks around it, usually refers to making a sexual choice. The impression is that any choice is all right. It's just a matter of preference. When it comes to sex, don't kid yourself about some of those choices being morally right. And then we get some bullet points. 1, it's wrong to have sex with any close relative. Cool. Well, there was MM Romance has some issues with that. 2, it's wrong to have sex with animals. And 3, it's wrong to have homosexual sex. So we have now created this level playing field. Being gay is the same as engaging in incest and bestiality. So says whatever these things are. This isn't the only Bible passage that says homosexual sex is a sin. Read also Romans 1:26 through 27. If someone tells you homosexuality is an alternative lifestyle, meaning that it's okay, don't let those words fool you. It's an alternative, all right.
A sinful one.
And flipping back to the index, I see there's also an entry for hurt feelings. I have that right now. What does this say here? 853. What can I do with my hurt feelings? 853. Ecclesiastes. Have you ever heard someone, this is about Ecclesiastes 7:21 through 22. Have you ever heard someone say something bad about you? Yeah, the Bible. Or have you ever overheard someone you like say something about you then laugh? It's hard not to be sensitive to what others say about you. Maybe sometimes you're too sensitive. Oh God. Solomon says, do not pay attention to every word people say. He's wise because lots of times people say things they don't really mean. Maybe the Bible didn't really mean that. Maybe God didn't really mean that. If you think about it, you can probably remember times when you've said things about others that you didn't mean. If you remember that human beings are weak and often say things they don't really mean, it will help you follow Solomon's good advice. So, when you have hurt feelings, get over it. So I'm not a Christian so much anymore, not at all. But I was confirmed into a United Methodist Church when I was 13. And I believed, I had faith. I was raised by very Protestant Christian grandparents. My grandmother in particular believed. And my paternal grandparents were super Catholic, and they believed. So I believed. I believed very hard, in a Protestant kind of way, which is to say I had a personal relationship with God and Jesus Christ. I read my Bible cover to cover. I went to church every Sunday, and I believed the core tenets of Christianity. I believed that God was real. He created the universe and everything inside of it, including me, that he numbered me specifically. He knew about every hair on my head, that he loved me. But because Adam and Eve disobeyed him, sin entered the world, and we were fallen, and the only way that we could be saved is through belief and faith in Jesus Christ. And while I was a very Protestant Christian and did not believe you had to do good works, I was a budding little organizer, and I believe so strongly that I remember standing up in church when I was, 11 years old, in the kids' choir section during the part of service where people could just stand up and say things. Also, not very Catholic. I remember standing up and saying, we're all good Christians here, and we need to support Christian fiction and Christian movies, which is why I'm organizing everyone to go see The Omega Code. Do you remember The Omega Code?
On the eve of the new millennium,
Somebody out there say change. That's right.
the truth about the ancient prophecies is about to be revealed.
What was the guy in that? What was the guy in that movie?
Casper Van Dien,
Wasn't he in Starship Troopers?
I'm from Buenos Aires, and I say kill them all.
The Omega Code. Remember that movie? Boy, was it bad.
Early tests are confirming that the ocean's molecular structure has somehow mutated.
1999. The year of the Matrix. Casper Van Dien.
Casper Van Dien.
Oh boy, what a bullshit movie. It says here on Wikipedia the film received mostly negative reviews.
And I say kill them all!
Rotten Tomatoes gives the Omega Code a rating of 8%.
Casper Van Dien.
Mysticism, overacting, and overall gimmickry eventually weigh down the story.
I need you to be my spokesman for this new world, my prophet, my...
Casper Van Dien.
Yeah, well, it was bad. It was bad, and I shouldn't have been. I don't know why I did that. This is all to give you a background on me now, which is I am a godless atheist. And it didn't happen all in one go, although I do remember one specific thing. It just kind of grew over time. I had questions that my faith and my church couldn't answer. The one specific thing that I remember was, I think it was in 6th grade, so it would have been around this time. We were doing a module in science class on evolution, and you know what? Those Christians are right. If you teach kids about evolution, they're probably not going to believe the Bible. And I remember going to choir practice and asking the choir instructor, the adult leader of the children's choir, how do you explain frogs? I just remember her being baffled. And I sort of described what we were learning about evolution in class, and I remember she said, that's not something you're supposed to ask questions about. And I don't know if you know me, but the thought of not asking questions about something is horrifying. And it wasn't the beginning of the end, and it wasn't the end of the beginning. It was somewhere along the way. But that landed hard for me, that I can't be a part of something that asks me not to ask questions. And eventually my faith was gone. I did a philosophy major in college, and as part of that, I studied other religions. I have studied Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism, and I've come to my personal understanding of religion, which is that there's something about being a person in the world amongst other people that can make you feel like a smaller part of a bigger thing. And it's hard to describe that. And religions are ways that we can describe that. And because people have busy lives and they like hierarchy and leadership, we get organized religions. I do not begrudge anyone their faith. And I don't, even though I have this sort of like more anthropological understanding of religion now, I don't look at people who have faith and believe as like, oh, good for you, you believe in that thing. I think that there is a capital T truth inside people who believe. And that gets us to the romance book topic of the day, which is Saint by Sierra Simone. I walked into Saint and its previous 2 books, Sinner and Priest, thinking that I was going to be reading fiction that was wrestling with Christian faith and how to integrate sexuality into that. And that's not what I got at all. That's really not what these books are about. And so I think that there was just like a mismatch in my expectations in the marketing of these books and what I was expecting to get out of them, because I was really expecting to have characters of faith having to deal with that. And none of these books really have characters of faith. None of these books have characters who believe in Christianity. I think that's a really important thing to know before walking into these books. And it colors my understanding of the entire trilogy in positive and in negative ways. This is going to be a slightly different video than past ones of mine because Saint doesn't have a lot of stuff happening in it. There's not a lot to recap exactly, so it's going to be a fairly short recap. I am going to briefly discuss the previous 2 books, so you've got the same context that I have, but the recap section will be quite short. I will try to impart the taste, the feeling, the sense of the book, because I think a thing that people really like about Saint and Priest is the way that Sierra Simone wrote those books. It is very beautiful. It has the quality of someone who perhaps was Catholic and believed in Catholicism and then left the church, but still is in awe of the stained glass windows and the smoke billowing out of the censers, of the vestments and the ritual and the practice of it all, and wanted to recall and associate all of those feelings and sensations in the words that they were using. But let's be real, like, plot's pretty thin. Then we'll do our normal discussion and analysis of this book. We'll talk about what I liked, I didn't like a lot, how I think it fits into the romance genre, and then just like some general things about it. So let's begin. As ever, we should begin with short descriptions of the characters. There are the two male main characters, Aiden Bell and Elijah Iverson, and then a few relevant side characters. Aiden Bell is 37 years old. I think he turns 38 in this book. Creepy because I am 37, turning 38 imminently in just a few days. He is a former chaotic millionaire. Him and his brother Sean, the main character from the previous book, Sinner, both are filthy rich playboys, and Aiden put the chaotic in chaotic millionaire. He was a playboy. He is described before he becomes a monk in this book as having a playboy's body, which is code for kind of like a drugs and exercise sculpted Twinkie body. And he carried on a secret relationship with his older brother's best friend, who is 5 years older than him, Elijah. Aiden worked in finance, whereas Elijah did like event planning kinds of things. And they knew each other all the years that Elijah and Sean, his best friend, were growing up, and Aiden kind of grew up in their shadow. Aiden eventually realized that he's bisexual and he has a little thing for Elijah. And at a gala that occurred in Sinner, they kiss and they start a torrid love affair with each other that lasts for a while and then suddenly ends. It is of some note, although fairly small, that Elijah is black and Aiden is white. And when the book begins, it is 5 years after these two guys have broken up, because one night out of nowhere, Aiden just left his life behind and decided to become a monk. At a monastery just outside of Kansas City. At that monastery, there are a bunch of monks, brothers of Aiden's, who are, come in and out of the story. The two most relevant are Abbot Jerome, the head of the monastery, Mount Sergius, and Brother Connor, Aiden's mentor monk. This is a bit of a road story. So Aiden and Elijah are going to do a grand tour of monasteries in Europe, and there are characters at all of those locations. I don't know that any of them are important enough to bring up, other than one, which is Father Jordan. And I just want to note, we've got Abbot Jerome and Father Jordan. Lots of J names. Father Jordan was a character in, I think, both of the previous books. Certainly in the first book, he was the male main character Tyler from Priests, his confessor, the priest that he does confession with. He becomes relevant much, much later in the story. And then finally, the third J name, beginning an epic run of triplets that we are going to encounter in Saint, is Jamie, Elijah's current fiance. And in my notes, I have good guy trademark. He's a librarian, he's handsome, he's outdoorsy, he's like the perfect guy. So we know what's going to happen there. All right. Before we recap the plot of Saint, I wanted to briefly talk about the first two books in the series, Priest and Sinner. Priest is Catholic cosplay, and I believe that the author Sarah Simone has basically said this about that book and really the entire trilogy, that this was her working through a lot of Catholic guilt, very stereotypical guilt that she had from having previously been a Catholic, and wanting to work through her ideas around spirituality and sexuality. So notably, these are, the first two books are male-female romance books, not necessarily my bag. Although I've had male-female romances. I was the male in them. And they are both from the guy's perspective. And they are all first-person books. And that will come up when I discuss Saint. Priest follows Tyler, who runs into Poppy. Quite a name. Tyler has been a priest for about 3 years at basically his local parish church. And he really shouldn't be a priest because he sees this redheaded bombshell in the confessional and immediately gets a hard on and is like, I gotta have sex with this woman. And he does repeatedly all over the church. In fact, on the altar, he bends her over the piano in the nave. her on the altar and performs some backdoor insertion on her in his office using sacramental oil. This is what I mean when I say it's Catholic cosplay. We are taking all of the trappings of Catholicism and we are just like using it in like like basically an erotica. I don't. It's a romance. There's a happily ever after, but the characters are very thin in Priest. And Tyler shouldn't be a priest because he immediately gives in to this lust, but he also shouldn't be a priest because he decided to be a priest for reasons completely unrelated to faith and religion. His older sister Lizzie is kind of the driving force for what happens in all of these books. She was sexually abused and assaulted by their parish priest when they were all younger, and she committed suicide because of it. And it ripped their family apart. And Tyler, for some reason, got it in his head that he should have done something about this. That he should have noticed that something was going on. He should have. He was home when his sister Lizzie did this, and he didn't stop her. And that the way that he is going to atone for this is by becoming a priest and sort of healing the community that was fractured by what the former priest did. Like many years pass as he grows up and then does all the things you have to do to become a Catholic priest, and then he goes there in order to like repair the community, and also he's doing like sort of personal penance. He does not seem to like really believe in God, and he doesn't have like a Catholic thought in his brain across the course of the entire book. He has sex with this woman multiple times. It's more than a third of the way through the book because there's insta lust and they almost immediately start hooking up. It's not even a third of the way into the book where he starts thinking like, oh, you know what, maybe I should confess. It never occurs to him to pray to a saint on his behalf for this, which is very wild because his office has a portrait of Saint Augustine, which is like a little joke, a little wink from the author, because Saint Augustine's Confessions is about like his lustful life. So we're meant like, if you know that, you're meant to be like, I see what you're doing, Sierra. But like he could pray to Saint Augustine on his behalf. Does not occur to him to do that. He doesn't pray the Rosary at all, I don't think. I think he shows Poppy, who's not a Catholic. She comes to confess because she's going through like her own stuff. I think we don't even encounter the Rosary until like the back third of the book. So like he's a priest who has no faith. He's doing it for for his own personal reasons, which means that by the end of the book, it's very easy for him to walk away because he made a vow of chastity to be a priest, but he doesn't think of what he's doing as breaking that. He thinks that he's going to lose his job. That is literally how he thinks about it, that if he gets caught, he'll lose his job. And he doesn't want to do that because he feels like he'll be letting Lizzie down and he'll be letting the community down. He doesn't at all worry about letting God down or breaking faith with the church or anything like that. So really didn't like Priest. Least favorite book in the series. But I do think that, especially if you're Catholic or you have some Christian religious trauma, it is probably like a good tool for experiencing like healing around that trauma, because the whole point of the book is how Tyler integrates feelings of spirituality with sexuality, the holy and the profane, and sees that there's like no difference there. I think that there are some wonderful moments. There's this moment where he's praying in the chapel or in front of the altar, and he just like feels something, and it's the air conditioning coming on. But he even though he knows intellectually that it was the air conditioning coming on, he feels like it was something more. He feels like there was something there. I've had those kinds of feelings before. I had that feeling at a Sufjan Stevens concert, which I won't go into details in this video. I have a little video on my TikTok where I talk about it a little bit, and maybe I'll talk about it more in a coffee chat someday. That was a real spiritual moment for me. So I think that there are some wonderful little moments. There's like very beautiful writing in Priest, but it really just didn't work for me. And I think Poppy, the female main character, is like such a not like other girls girl. I don't like her at all. There is a super ham-fisted third act breakup where she somehow knew that Tyler would come over to her house, so she had like the competing guy over there and she was kissing him, but she was only doing it to push him away because she didn't want to be the one who like made Tyler lose his faith, which doesn't matter, Poppy, because he doesn't have any faith to begin with. And then, but I think I'm putting words in her mouth because I think even she said like, I didn't want to be the one who made you lose your job. It's like, why are we talking about this thing that it's like a job? All right, book 2 takes place some years later. I think probably something like 3, 4, 5 years later. Tyler and Poppy are married and together, and now we are following Sean. He is the best male main character, and this is the best book by far. I really, really liked Sinner. I wish I was doing this video about Sinner, but you know, it's like it's not gay at all. Although he does like butt stuff. Sean Bell is like the polar opposite of Tyler. Sean does not have faith, doesn't go to church, doesn't believe, and I don't know that he ever did, but he certainly lost it when everything went down with Lizzie. All of his, we were told, either in Priest or in Sinner, that moment caused everyone in the Bell, this is the last name of the family, it's the Bell family, all of the Bells lost their faith in their religion, except for the mom. She continued to go to church, but like she also basically lost her faith quite a bit. And Sean has gone off and become like a very wealthy man, working for very bad people. He works in some kind of financy kind of thing, doing deals, real estate, etc. And he is poised to take over a really bad firm, and he likes that. He likes sleeping around and not caring about anybody. He is just like, he is a dirtbag, and his entire life changes because of one night at a gala that had been organized on behalf of his best friend Elijah's dad, I believe. Elijah's father is like medical director, and at some event related to that, Elijah put the gala together, and Sean runs into this gorgeous, much younger woman, like 15 years younger, but like for him, she's like knockout perfect 10. But then we get all of the most wild things thrown at us one after another. Number 1, she's 15 years younger than him. Number 2, she's mostly a virgin. Number 3, she is Elijah's younger sister that he hasn't seen in years, so he didn't recognize her. And number 4, she's about to become a nun. Oh, Sean, danger, danger, back away. But he doesn't back away. They get into this sexual relationship where this woman, Zenny, another wild name, it's short for Zenobia. Zenny says, I know that everything about this is wrong, but I need this. I need to go through this to know what I'm going to leave to before I become a nun, which is so absurd, but in a way that I love. It's like high camp. Maybe not high camp, but it is quite campy. So they engage in this secret, hot, sexy love affair, having sex in all kinds of places. Yes, some backdoor action, but we find out after he gives her some backdoor attention, she gives it to him, and he's like, yeah, I like that. But this is a relationship that has an expiration date because she's gonna become a nun. This is like, she's gonna do this, and then it's gonna be over. And they set up rules, and they just keep breaking all the rules until they get to the end of the timeline, and they split up essentially. Something else has been brewing along the entire story, which is that Sean's mom has cancer. And Sean is mad at God. He's mad at God that he would have cursed his mother with cancer. And both him and his mom kind of come to that conclusion that you sometimes see in stories, that how can you not believe in something if you're mad at it? There's a big content warning on the book because it is like, it does have like a tragedy in it. Sean's mom just gets worse and worse. And that is, he has taken on all the responsibility for that. And it is the combination of watching his mom deteriorate and having a relationship with someone that he really cares about, even though it's wrong, that changes Sean. He becomes a very different person by the end of the book. And it is quite remarkable to watch his journey. And the writing in Sinner is quite different from both Priest and Saint. Priest and Saint have this like ornate, very, you could call it purple prose, but I think it transcends that. Purple prose, I think, is meant to be derogatory. I think Priest is maybe more like that. I think Saint, Sierra Simone really was trying to capture specific things, and maybe she did and maybe she didn't. Sinner is not like that at all. Sinner sounds like the inner monologue of this like dirtbag fuckboy who is learning about himself at 38 or however old he is. And that I loved. I loved that I believed that it was Sean talking in that book. And there's so many things that I love about it. The like one that I will note is that when everything went down with Lizzie, uh everyone, including some of the Iversons, were at the Bell household. And Sean lost it and locked himself in a bathroom. And Zenny was there at like 7 while he was like an older teenager, or maybe I got even in his 20s, I guess. Zenny wanted to do something for him, but she didn't know what. She only knew that Sean likes to read. So she found the first book that she could, which happened to be one of Sean's mom's like trashy paperback romance books, and she slipped it under the bathroom door. And Sean, having nothing else to do, just picks it up and like reads through the whole thing while he's locked in the bathroom. And that turned him into a romance book lover. So he's read romance and talks about it with his mom. And there is, if you've read the Watchmen graphic novel, you'll know that there is a comic book, a pirate comic book that's inside of the comic, and it kind of is a commentary on what's going on in Watchmen. That happens in Sinner. There is this historical romance series called the Wakefield Saga that keeps coming up, and Sean keeps comparing what's going on in his life to this romance book. And there is this incredible scene where he is with his mom in some inpatient facility where there's like other patients around, like in a common room. And apparently when he visits there, he always reads Wakefield Saga books out loud, and it's like a group activity. It's just wonderful, wonderful. So Zenny, obviously, and spoilers for all this stuff. Zenny, at the very end of the book, with some prodding from like the Reverend Mother, realizes that she can have a relationship with God and she can do the things that she wants to do without becoming a nun. And then she gets together with Sean. And then, like, they have a bunch of they get married, have a bunch of babies. We catch up with them in Saint, and by the end of Saint, they have 5 kids. I don't love how all these books are like, the proper way for relationships to go is for it to be a man and a woman, or a man and a man if circumstances allow, and you get married and you have lots of kids. Like, whatever, I guess it's fine. I mean, they have that Catholic thing like pressing down on them, like having lots of kids. That's like kind of in their DNA. Coming out of Sinner, I was like, wow, what a great book. And everyone says that Priest is the weakest one and Saint is maybe the best. So like I was so excited for Saint, and I didn't like it. Here now a brief recap of the events of Saint. We begin with a kind of a tone poem prologue. This is from the perspective of Elijah, but we don't know who this character is yet. We just know that it is we're in the perspective of an author of some kind who is looking at a monk out somewhere in a lavender field, and it is beautiful. And what we know from this narrator, who we will never see again, we get POVs from Elijah in an epistolary kind of way, but this is the only POV that is like the narration coming directly from him. We know that whoever this monk is, Elijah loved him and still loves him. And then we get the first of 5 parts of this book. It is split up into 5 parts, which are geographical. We are going to travel the world, and we begin in Kansas. We're in Kansas City at Mount Sergius. This is where Aiden is a monk, and he is just coming off of a 2-week vow of silence, and he has done well at Mount Sergius. We will learn through the course of the book that it was very important for his mental health that he came to this place, but he needs something more because he has not like fully purged himself of his feelings for Elijah. The Abbot Jerome, has agreed to send him on a fairly like fun trip, touring breweries across Europe, which are also located at Trappist monasteries. These are monasteries of a different order than the one that Aiden is in, that are like way more like hardcore. And Aiden thinks that this is the kind of thing that he needs because he still has all these lustful feelings for Elijah, so much so that he regularly, consistently wears a chastity cage. The book belabors this at great length, that he is constantly wearing a cage in about the first half of the book. The book is so much more concerned with this cage than it is with any faith that he has. I checked in my Kindle. The word Jesus is used, I think, 12 times in the entire book, and almost exclusively to describe a crucifix or as a curse word, as in like, Jesus Christ, Elijah, you're me so good. Whereas the word cage is used over 40 times. But he's got to wear that cage because otherwise he would be breaking his his vow of chastity by pleasuring himself. So he also is constantly having wet dreams about Elijah. And wouldn't you know it, Elijah shows up. Elijah shows up out of nowhere while Aiden is still on his vow of silence. So Elijah just speaks to him and tells him that he wanted him to know that he was with someone now, a man named Jamie, that they are engaged and they're going to get married. And I want to give you a couple sprinklings of the writing style. So here is how Aiden thinks about Elijah in the early part of this book. If I were to make a stained glass window displaying an image of God's creativity and capacity for beauty, it would be this. It would be Elijah with an unshaven face and in those shorts. It would be his eyes in that dark gold brown hue. It would be his mouth, that jaw, that throat. It would be a saint in low top sneakers with a halo of Kansas sunshine around his head. So we are meant to think like, okay, and that's the end of it, right? The book is over because Aiden is going to go off and tour these Trappist monasteries and he's going to pick one of them and he is going to cut Elijah out of his life and give himself fully to God, right? Wrong! Because Elijah works for Mode magazine, which is meant to be like a GQ or an Esquire, and he has decided that he is going to write about breweries at monasteries. And the abbot thinks, well, we could get some good press and sell more beer. I don't know why I'm doing Abbot Jerome, this Kansas City guy like that, but anyway. Jerome decides like, oh, what a capital idea, Elijah. You can include us in your story. And oh, by the way, our Aiden here, brother Patrick, is going to be touring breweries across Europe, which aligns with your story so well, almost like you knew. And you engineered this so you could be with him. So we will, you can go along with him as he tours Europe at all these breweries, and you can write a story about it for your little magazine. So they're gonna be together. That's like basically everything that happens in part one, and then eventually they leave. There is a lot of content in part one. I think it is the longest part of the book. There are 25 chapters in it. Aiden and Elijah have an almost kiss, and there is a very important moment where Aiden is in like in the Hermitage or like in an abandoned chapel, and Elijah is with him and he says like, watch this, like this is why I come here. And Aiden prays at night while all the fireflies come out, and it is a very like spiritual moment. It's an important moment because Elijah will reference it much later in the book. Aiden, for whatever reason, does not tell Jerome like, I can't do this, like I got feelings for this guy, this is a bad thing. He decides like, no, I'm sure it'll be fine, and it's like a test. And Jerome seems to know, and Connor seem to know. They're like, perhaps you can use this as an opportunity to decide like what you like, if you really want to be a monk or not. One other fairly important thing that goes down in the Kansas section is we learn about Lectio Lexapro. I think that is a very cute, clever description for this. Lectio is like Bible study time for monks, Lectio Divinia, and Aiden, we learn in these early sections, has had mighty struggles with his mental health, and he has gone to therapy, and he is medicated. He's on Lexapro and Wellbutrin, presumably for depression and anxiety, and he has brought some brothers together for what they call Lectio Lexapro, which is basically like group. They do group therapy with each other, and just talk about like their issues and stuff. Aiden is out as a bisexual man to this group, and that is an important part of the small amount of queerness that actually exists in this book, as far as I can see, which is Aiden likes that while the church condemns homosexual activity as a sin, by being in a Catholic religious order, by being a monk, he's kind of on a level playing ground with everyone, because everyone has to be celibate. It doesn't matter that he's gay or bisexual. Part 2 is Belgium. Aiden and Elijah end up at Semois Abbey, and at the beginning of this part, Aiden affirms or reaffirms to himself, I can't fuck this up, and so we know he's going to. And this is a short section. We spend a lot of time like learning about the Abbey and Trappist life, which Aiden thinks is no joke, and he is interested in it. But it's kind of like It's not even really, it's not a Goldilocks thing. He's gonna try different forms of Trappist monasteries, and I think he knows right from the get-go, like, this one is probably not gonna be the one for me, even though he and Elijah like it a lot. It's very beautiful there. And they go tour some ruins, and while they're in those ruins and having lots of conversations about why Aiden became a monk and what's going on with Elijah as an author, and they have the first of many, many, many conversations about religion. Aiden blows Elijah. They are lost in some ruins that they are completely alone in because the public is not allowed to go in them. But the people in charge at Samoa Abbey are like, oh well, you're a monk and a writer for Mode magazine. You'll probably be fine. Here, take this hand drawn map and just get lost in these ruins. So they do, and they reminisce about another time that they got lost. And Elijah says, I had a good time. And Aiden says, yeah, because I blew you in the car afterward. Like I said, a good time. And you think like, that's a weird thing for exes to be talking about. I wonder what's going to happen here. Oh, Aiden's on his knees and he's got Elijah's in his mouth. Okay. It is here where we learn about the significance of a tattoo that Elijah has and games. So we will see the tattoo in part 3. The notable thing about it is it includes the Latin words quid si, which means what if. We learn about what that means here in the previous part in Belgium, which is that Aiden and Elijah had like a role playing element of their sexual relationship, that they would play games. One of them says, do you think about the games we used to play? What would we play here in the ruins? And then they kind of describe exactly what's happening to them, like, oh, I would be a writer and I would be learning about brewer, like monks and breweries, and you'd be a monk and you'd get on your knees and you'd put my dick in your mouth. And so they do. Again, trying to capture the feelings of these scenes. Aiden, while he is on his knees, thinks, I open my mouth, tongue out, like I'm ready to receive communion. And the way my lips and tongue move around him, it's like a prayer. It's like chanting a secret silent psalm just for us. Can you? I ask him. They're the first words we've spoken aloud since I told him the game I wanted to play. And even in a hushed tone, they feel loud, loud, loud. I am not going to go into every triplet throughout this book, but Simone makes frequent use of 3 times repetitions throughout. While Aiden is doing this, he has an orgasm just from blowing Elijah. And earlier, while he heard Elijah taking care of himself in the next room, Aiden masturbates with his cage on just by rubbing himself in a way that is like somewhat feminized. So this is bad. They are packing up, about to go to the next abbey, which will be in France. And Aiden thinks, "All right, well, I've screwed up this one time, but I'll never do it. I'll never do it again." But not really, because he thinks like, "But I am gonna do it again. I know I'll do it again. I know I'll do it again." And he doesn't know like what kind of prayer to say about this. He doesn't know what to do about it at all. Earlier, he was like easily confessed to things as part of like his practice and his ritual, and now he's like, "Oh no, I can't confess this. That would be like, I don't know what to do about this." He just thinks like, well, hopefully we won't do this again. He has some kind of faith that it's going to work out, but he does feel like he has been part of 2 betrayals, that he was part of Elijah betraying Jamie, and he betrayed the person that he is in a solemn vow with, God. And before they leave to go to France, Elijah slips into Aiden's bedroom and jerks him off. So immediately not working out with the whole, well, I'm never going to do this again. Part 3 is in France. We are now in the back half or back 40% of the book. And this is where Aiden is really struggling with like, what am I doing? And how can I like, do I want to be a monk anymore? Do I want to be with Elijah? What is all of this? Aiden has that specific thought of like, why am I doing this? And then later, while they're on their way to this monastery in France, Elijah just like prompts him directly, like, so why the church? There's so many it seems like there's lots of other things that you could have done besides the church. And what Aiden reveals is that there was something that happened on that night, which I don't know that it's literally written with like a capital T, capital N, but the very last night that Elijah and Aiden were together was a bad night. He had a real dark night of the soul. He never comes right out and says, I was suicidal. But he says, but eventually when he reveals all of this to Elijah a little bit later in the book, he he says everything except those words. And like we can kind of tell at this point that because Aiden is thinking about it, that's probably what was happening. He thinks about like the night of that night, like the literal darkness of the night that night was like this oil, this black thing that was about to get inside of him, which weirdly is also how Bran in God of Fury describes a similar thing. But that in the midst of all of this, where Aiden was maybe about to no longer be with us, he just out of nowhere got a Bible verse texted to him at 3:30 in the morning, and that caused him to think like church stuff. And he just Googled churches near me, and one of them was Mount Sergius, and he's like, monk, monk. I love that show. I love that monk. And so he just in his pajamas goes to the monastery and he's like, I want to do this. And they're like, okay, there's some steps, but you can if you want. And at this point in the book, we have learned that Aiden took all of those steps. He left Elijah with no explanation, sold all of his assets. So he is like, taken the vow of poverty. So millions of dollars that he has donated to all of these causes. And this saved his life. Lectio, Lexapro, therapy, and everything around being a monk saved his life. This is something that he said earlier in the book that this saved his life. Now we know that it was like quite literal. He will not reveal all. So he has revealed most of this to us, but he has not revealed this to Elijah. But anyway, they show up at this French Trappist monastery, which is like real cool. It's a little too. I think it is kind of Goldilocks. Like Semois was kind of like average Trappist. This French place, which is like, what's it called? Our Lady of Flowers or something? Something with flowers. I don't remember. But that this place is like way too soft. It's just like all these lavender fields. The bees pollinate the lavender and they get the honey and they turn it into mead. And it's just like the monks there say like, oh, we're pretty chill for Trappists. And lavender, wasn't that what we saw in the prologue? This must be where Aiden gets well. And he does multiple times by Elijah. They go to this old deconsecrated chapel. So I think, we know like something's going to go on down. Something's going to go on down there. And that also that there's like a grotto, which is definitely going to become like a sex grotto. Simone even calls the chapel a sex chapel afterwards, like sex dash chapel. But we just like know that they are going to be all over each other, and they are. And we also hear from the brother who's showing them around that there is some American mystic who is also here, and we won't see him until much later, but it's Jordan. It's Father Jordan. Brother Luke, in calling him a mystic, so they're in France, he says, il est dans la lune. That literally means he's in the moon, but it's like his head is in the clouds, or like he's a little mystical. But anyway, they're alone in the deconsecrated chapel, and Aiden thinks that he has an ache. He has an ache in his rear end, not from like sitting on the train too long, but an ache that can only be soothed with dick, which coincidentally is also how Sean describes Zenny's her and if there's one thing that I really didn't like about Priest or Sinner is the density of the use of the word for female anatomy. That's a nice thing about Sinner, is that there are no in this book, but there are boy. They don't call that mercifully. I'm gonna have to bleep a lot right here. They don't like the very first time, but like they're going to like there's going to be butt stuff, because Elijah goes crazy seeing Aiden working in the lavender fields in his underwear, because Aiden, for whatever reason, like everyone tells him at the beginning of the book, like, you're not bringing enough on this trip. Like Connor and Jerome look at his suitcase and they're like, you have like one shirt and one pair of shorts. What are you doing? And he's like, it's enough. But it's not enough. So he's working in like this hot field in his habit, which is hot. And all of the French monks are like, just like, you're gonna die out there if you keep working in that habit, bro. Like, you just like take it off. So he's working in the fields in his underwear, and this is something I don't love about this book. One of the many things I don't love about this book. Well, I'll get into this more later, but Aiden's body has changed. So in his character description, I said that he had this playboy body. He basically was like a twink. And he has put on a lot of weight in the monastery, and he's done a lot of manual labor, so he has a lot of muscles. But like he doesn't have a six pack anymore. He has kind of like a barrel belly, and his arms are big, and he's big. He thinks about it, especially in the back half of the book, a lot in a way that I don't love. Like one of the last chapters, he thinks about how like, oh, I'm like the size of an armoire. But it really does something for Elijah seeing this guy that he used to love and still loves, like in his underwear, sweaty, covered in lavender. Elijah is like, I must have this man. At least he showers first, though. Elijah left under mysterious circumstances. Not really mysterious, but he was gone for a moment. And then while he and Aiden are alone together, he's got a condom and lube that he got from town. So it's like he was ready to do this. We will find out, I think, in the France section, by the end of the France section, that Elijah has broken things off with Jamie. And that, yeah, obviously, this whole trip was like a thing to get him with Aiden to see if there is something here. And so they just like they just start having a lot of sex with each other. And it is around this time that Aiden stops wearing the cage. So Aiden is, bottoming for Elijah, but he is no longer caged. He's kind of going through this uh like evolution, this like sexual evolution of being, like caged and non-sexual to like caged and experiencing like surface sexuality to like caged and bottoming, and now he's like uncaged and bottoming. There will be one more evolution shortly, but it is like in all of the previous books, it is in the process of having sex that Aiden feels like the most spiritual that he ever has. And he is growing increasingly bitter and resentful that he has to choose between Elijah and God. We will just get pages and pages and pages of him thinking, why can't I have both? Why do I have to choose? And I just like, I highlighted a lot of those sections, but every time in my notes I say, I don't know, man, but you do. If you want to be a monk, you do have to choose. So anyway, Aiden knows that this is not going to be the right monastery for him. It's like even softer than in Kansas. So they're going to move on to the place that he thought was going to be the one anyway. It's a Trappist monastery in Ireland called St. Columba's, which is like hardcore. And it's on a cliffside, and it's very like ominous. But before he leaves, he does run into Father Jordan, who is mysterious, very mysterious, and he tells Aiden about the independent sacramental movement, which is a real thing. These are various churches that have broken away from Rome or Constantinople or Canterbury or whatever, who are kind of doing their own thing. And Jordan and a few other characters will describe kind of like it wasn't always like this, right? Like early monasticism was like very personal, and like it became rigid and hierarchical over time. That's a Catholic thing. Like you should, if you are Catholic, you should think like, and that's a good thing. But Jordan and Aiden are maybe like on like a kind of like a progressive or a liberal sort of Catholic. And Aiden is kind of entranced by this idea, and we'll see where that goes. Along the way here at the end of the France part, as they're about to go to Ireland, they do like a stopover in London, and it is very challenging for both Elijah and Aiden because Aiden spills coffee on his habit, so he has to change into street clothes. His one habit gets sullied, so he has to change into his one pair of street clothes. And it's him and Elijah in normal clothes, just doing touristy stuff in London. Aiden thinks that they're playing his favorite what if game. What if we were together? And it's the end of the France section where in one of Elijah, we see Elijah's notebooks and we see excerpts from the article that he wrote. Elijah reflects on, I like this, he reflects on the difference between chronological or clock time and subjective or deep time. Where did our time go, he wonders. Not their youth, but moments of fullness that I want. Always those moments that he is not lamenting the clock time, the chronological time that he missed or does not have with Aiden. He is lamenting not having the moments, like these somewhat sacred moments. What Aiden called a perfect night when they're being touristy together in London. Aiden says, "I just want to have a perfect night with you." So we are approaching the end game. We are in Ireland. We've been told through the whole story that this is like probably the place where Aiden is going to want to go. It is like super strict. They're almost completely silent there all the time. They're kind of like passive aggressive in a way that reminds me of my family, where all the previous monasteries, certainly Aiden's in Kansas City and the two in the Trappist monasteries in France and Belgium, there is like there's a ritual calendar of the day, not calendar. There's a ritual structure to the day that is filled with various prayers, compline, vespers, etc. And something that Aiden thinks is very cool is that in France, that instead of like while they're out working, they'll just do some of those prayers out while they're working. They don't go back to the monastery, to the abbey to do that. That's like kind of a little compromise that they've made. He thinks that's a cool idea, and he brings it to Ireland, and the abbot there is like, "Oh, what a novel idea." But there is this like there are prayers and things all throughout the day, and all the previous monasteries are like, oh, but guests don't need to do that. Like, you're welcome to join in if you want, but you don't have to. And then it's at St. Columba's, they don't say that. I don't think I have it in my notes, but it is definitely like a passive aggressive thing where Aiden thinks something like, they don't tell you that you have to, but you know that you need to. And we get I think kind of a silly, even further raising of the stakes in Ireland, where Aiden talks with. Remember, we're supposedly touring all these breweries. Oh, and Jerome, the abbot from back in Kansas, had like there's multiple things wrapped up in this. Like he also kind of has Aiden on like a secret mission where it's like get their secrets at these monasteries, find out all their methods and stuff. So Aiden is talking with the people in the breweries about like their beer and their other products, and he talks with a layperson who is responsible for the brewery at St. Columba's. And this person says like, well, it's like such a strict place. A lot of people don't come here, and it's like St. Columba's might not even exist in 30 years because they're not getting replacement young people, young men for every monk that dies. So Aiden thinks like, well, if I don't come here, this place could go under. And it is around this time that Elijah gives Aiden a quick little blowy under his habit, and Aiden thinks that this is one of those moments, that this is one of those perfect moments. Again, it's a combination of sex and prayer for him. This leads him to want to tell Elijah about what happened. So he tells him about that night, which actually the chapter is subtitled It, because that's what Aiden thinks of, that his depression and his suicidal ideation is a thing. It's an it. So he spells all of this out for Elijah and mentions the text that he got, that's why he chose the church. The Bible verse that he got was Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made the heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Which really feels like exactly the thing that Aiden needed at that time. And we are in the end game now. Aiden says, let's play one more game. Let's play the game of what if I left? What if I left for you? Actually, it's not a game. Elijah says, is this a game? And Aiden says, like, no. Or yes, it doesn't matter. Like, what if we just do this? Like, he thinks, like, his experiences of spirituality through sexuality with Elijah, and Elijah has told him like everything about like, I broke it off with Jamie. I knew that like I loved Jamie, but I was always in love with you. Without like, Aiden has gone on the journey at this point of like realizing that he got everything that he needed out of the monastery, which is a little selfish, but that he feels like he could leave for Elijah. But now things are going to shift onto Elijah, because as they are about to leave, Aiden realizes that Elijah left early, and he left with a note. It's not a good one. The note says, and I understand, more triplets, why you came and why you stayed and why you saw a future for yourself like this, another triplet. And that's why I cannot take it from you. I love you like that. I love you like this. I love you like everything. 3 triplets. He is leaving Aiden for the same reason why Poppy left Tyler. He doesn't want to be the one who caused Aiden to lose his faith or to break his vow or to whatever. He says at the end of this letter that I can't compete with the fireflies in the cloister. We then get part 5, which is called Kansas Again. This is the last like 10% of the book. Aiden is back at the monastery, and he gets a copy of the article that Elijah wrote, and it's very much about how Elijah is still in love with Aiden. It's kind of a weird thing to be in this magazine article about supposed to be about like monks and breweries, and he still hasn't confessed. He does. He eventually, like, Connor and Jerome like seem to know, and they're giving Aiden some space here. But Aiden is being like a real sad boy. He thinks Elijah will always worry about measuring up to what I left behind because I'll have left it behind for him, and he'll worry about me regretting the choice I made, and maybe he'll even worry that I'll go back. So like this is sort of implying that if Aiden chooses Elijah, Elijah will have an ex, Jamie, but so will Aiden. His ex will be God, which is quite an ex. It's quite an ex. But he does discuss this with Connor, and Connor talks about the same thing that Father Jordan said, which is, the idea of monasticism used to be an unheard of thing, and that he describes the idea of there being many gates. There's many gates to whatever it is that we're doing here. Because Aiden is talking with him about like his experiences with Elijah, and he said, I had both. God and him, and it felt better than anything. So now we get something that I feel like happens a lot in romance books in the very end, which is we start getting time jumps. So 3 weeks pass, still at the monastery, and some a brother named Titus says, "Brother Patrick, you have a visitor." He drops his voice conspiratorially, and he's handsome. And you think like, oh, it's Elijah. They're gonna get back together, but it's not Elijah. It's Jamie. Perfect Jamie. Jamie says like, oh, I think you know that we broke up and I wanted to, and Jamie comes there with muffins, like vegan muffins in like a non-dishwash safe tin. It is all this stuff that Aiden's like, wow, this guy drives me crazy. He's way too perfect. Kind of like God, if you think about it. Yeah, anyway, Jamie is kind of like shocked that Elijah and Aiden didn't end up together. And it's, he's there being like, you know that you can if you want, because it's like, it hurts me a lot, but like, it just seemed like this was going to happen. And Jamie, being perfect, says, it hurts now, but it would have hurt much more 3 years later from now when this would have driven us apart anyway. And honestly, he adds, handing the container of muffins to me, which I take, I'm a lot more emotionally healthy than the two of you. I'm going to be fine a long time before you are. Which I think that might be the funniest thing in the whole book. Aiden reflects on the very last line of Elijah's article, which is, patience is what makes good beer and good love both. And it's what I believe has now given me the greatest gift I'll ever receive. Parentheses. And no, it isn't a case of the honey beer from Our Lady of the Fountains. I think I was right with that. And that's the end of the article with that little parenthesis. That's supposed to be in something like GQ, whatever. So Aiden is now reflecting on patience and everything that's going on, and he just like he calls up Tyler, his former priest brother, and says, I don't want to be a monk anymore. And he gets a little coaching from Tyler and abruptly ends the call, goes to talk with the abbot, and then 2 months later we find he's living with his dad. He's not a monk anymore. And basically, here at the end of all of it, Aiden basically wanted to prove to himself, so that he could prove to Elijah, that he didn't need the monastery. So he's like no contact with Elijah, even though it's still Sean's best friend. He's around. Aiden is like rebuilding a life by himself. He's working with Sean and Zenny at their nonprofit. And he runs into Father Jordan again. He goes to Father Jordan, who's like, I was expecting you. It's like, what? And we find out that Father Jordan is the one who texted Aiden. He somehow knew that he needed that. Wild. Because they decide that they're going to be like buddies. Aiden wants to become an oblate, which is kind of like a lay monk at Mount Sergius, and he's interested in working with Jordan on this independent sacramental movement kind of deal. And so Jordan gives him his phone number, and it's like, when he puts the phone number in, it brings up that text message from that night all those years ago. Weird, spooky. But there, and the book closes with another gala, many galas in these books, and Elijah's there and just like can't keep his hands off of Aiden. And Aiden tells him about how like, I was practicing patience. I want you to know that like I'm choosing you. But Elijah believes him and wants to give this a go. And the book ends. There is a very brief epilogue, but the book ends here with Aiden thinking, it feels too good to be true, like a spring of water coming from a severed head that is not out of nowhere. That is how the Belgian monastery, I think, started. Or maybe, oh no, Our Lady of Fountains. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? How can something beautiful come from the mess we made? And it all ends with Aiden saying, what if we played a game? And I believe the second to last sentence is one more Cage reference, because we can't end this book without a 41st invocation of Aiden's cage. And then the epilogue is just a short excerpt from a Mode Magazine article, a subsequent Mode Magazine article from Elijah, which was about their wedding, about getting married to an ex-monk. And the entire book ends with a triplet. And anyway, I already love him like how forever feels. I already love him like eternity is in the rearview mirror. I love him like everything. And in the author's note, Sierra Simone does a good job of making sure that she gives resources for people who are experiencing depression, including the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which you will also find in the description of this video. The end. Well, shit, that was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But I ended up doing, like, one, I wanted to do a little bit more resolution and detail on this so you got a bit of a flavor for the story. And two, I was doing a bit of my analysis along the way. But we will turn to that now. I want to talk about queerness in this book. I have been stuck with a thought in my head since I finished this book that I cannot get out, which is I don't know that you would have to change much at all for this to be an MF romance. Aiden could be a nun, or Elijah could be a woman. And what would have to change? Aiden would still be breaking their vow of chastity, being in a sexual relationship with someone. So from a storytelling perspective, there's really not anything related to their queerness that is tied up in what's going on in the plot. Not that there has to be. There doesn't have to be that. But it is unusual. Really, the only things that would have to change are a few thoughts that Aiden has along the way, and then something about their sexual relationship, which I neglected to mention during the recap, which is that toward the end, and this is one of the first things I wanted to talk about a little bit with queer male sexuality, toward the end of the book, in the back third, Aiden starts topping Elijah. So when this happens, Aiden thinks that when he was younger, although I think he was in his mid-30s, so like just, clock time younger, Elijah always topped and he always bottomed, because that just like kind of felt like what was supposed to happen. Elijah is taller than him. At the time, he was bigger than him, because recall, Aiden was this twinky little guy. And this was also Aiden's first time with a man. He was attracted to Elijah as a young person, but that he had been in relationships with women. Elijah was a gay man and was out, and I think he was out, and had been in relationships with guys, so he had more experience. So that just felt like the roles that they were supposed to take on at the time. And Aiden thinks like he never really questioned whether Elijah wanted it a different way. And I think that that is like a pretty common way that things can go, is that you end up two people who are perhaps versatile, don't have the actual discussion, and that like those positions can get a little locked in, and they either the whole time wanted something different or wanted to change things up, or as time passes, sometimes our preferences change. And then this is like two things that I want to discuss about this in particular, which is one, Elijah, when he is saying that he would like Aiden to do this, he says that he would like to get fucked by a big monk. By a big monk. So this gets into, so that like now we have to question, because I don't think we ever get to the bottom of it. Bottom. Did Elijah want to have a more versatile relationship, but it just like, Aiden was kind of like driving on what positions they were going to be in, and because he was not super experienced, he just wanted to go with him bottoming? Is that like, did Elijah want that versatility in the past? Or is it that when Elijah was bigger and Aiden was smaller, it felt like what they should be doing is Elijah topping and Aiden bottoming. And now that Aiden is bigger, you want to flip. There was, just in the past week or two, somebody asked on Ask Gay Bros, like, verse guys, how do you decide, like, if you're going to top or bottom? And so many people said, like, it's all about the other guy. Like, if the other guy is, if I'm bigger than the, like, it really kind of comes down to this. Like, if I'm bigger than the other guy, I want to top him. And if he's bigger than me, I want him to top me. And what everyone was saying is not like their penis size, they mean physically. I don't know what degree Sierra was thinking about this or not, or what kind of sensitivity readers or like input that she had from queer men, but like that could be something going on with Sean. I have Sean on the brain because I like Sean so much, and I don't particularly like these guys. It's not that I don't like them. It's just like we'll get to like my major criticisms with the book. But like whether or not this is intentional, like this is like a real thing that can go on with guys in long-term relationships. But there's another thing that's going on here, which is that Aiden, while he's thinking about this, like Elijah topping and leading me, less experienced, like when he's thinking about what was going on back then, he thinks like, well, maybe Elijah did want some versatility. But the way that Aiden describes it is that maybe Elijah wanted to hand off power. And I just think that that's a really unusual thought, even if it's true about topping and bottoming among people with penises. I think Simone is caught up a little bit in the dom sub aspect of the relationship here, and like the whole like chastity belt angle of it all. But like, who's topping and who's bottoming? Like, yes, bottoming is a fairly submissive act, but it just kind of like struck me unusual that he would think of it in such direct terms of like, it's about power, not about like wanting to get fucked. There actually is quite a lot of social science research on sorry, actually there isn't a lot of social science research on position preference, but I have read a lot of what is out there, and in it there are like kind of two consistent themes, which is like how people's position preference evolves tends to be a combination of social expectations about their body and what their body likes. So like big guys with big guys often are like shunted into like, well, you must be a top. But if you're especially if you're a queer man, you probably know that like there's a whole stereotype of, yeah, a little bit like big guys are more often going to be bottoms. And that runs into the other like side of this, which is people like to bottom if they experience pleasure from stuff in their butt. And a lot of times you start experimenting with that, during puberty, when you are starting to experiment with all of your parts and bits and pieces. So it's just like kind of unusual that, to me, for Aiden's first thought to have been about the power dynamic and not the pleasure dynamic. And I think that might be good writing. That might be good character writing. And like Aiden is like a pretty up guy, because like his whole reason for being at the monastery is because he needs control. He needs these like systems of control over himself, so much so that he's got to put his in a cage. And seems to be like how he also experiences sexuality and position preference, which is like kind of like almost like sad to me that he's not, for someone who like, but this is where it's like, I don't know if that character writing does work exactly, because this is the same guy who, when he is having sex, like all kinds of sex, like penetrative intercourse and outer course or whatever, when he's experiencing pleasure with this man that he loves, he is also like, one, he's experiencing it as pleasure, and two, that experience of pleasure, that phenomenological experience, is also like connected to a spiritual experience of his. So it just was like that one sentence, like really, I bumped on it like really hard, that it's like, I can't believe that your first thought about this would be about like the power dynamic and not about the pleasure dynamic. I guess in this section it's worth discussing the cage, since we're talking about queer men and sexuality. Someone DM'd me a thoughtful note when they saw that I was going to be doing a discussion about this, that they know people personally who have used cages in this way. I believe people do. I think that the cage is a physical manifestation of like I just mentioned this, well, repeating myself, it's a physical manifestation of the systems of control that Aiden needs in order to like stay on the straight and narrow. But it is unusual, and it's unusual, both the fact of it and how often it comes up. It's it's notable when at the very beginning of your book, your POV character that you're in his head is like, oh yeah, and also I put my in a cage all the time. It's like, oh, you're gonna note that. And actually, like amusingly, he referred to, and maybe I was just like skimming a little bit, and it didn't. I didn't clock right away that he was talking about that kind of a cage. He mentioned like him being in a cage in like the first or the second chapter, and I was like, ah yes, a metaphorical cage. And then in my notes later in chapter 3, I have this bullet: I'm realizing that earlier when Aiden referred to a cage he had on, it was not metaphorical. He literally cages himself. And then because it comes up so frequently, I didn't like put every single time he's thinking about, his like his dick in a cage. It's just that like it came up in the first two chapters. It came up again in chapter 3 when I realized like, oh, it's a real cage. And then in chapter 4, I'm like, oh my god, this is happening all the time. It's been mentioned 3 times already in this one chapter. So here are some examples from chapter 4 of how it comes up many times. Blood futilely rushing to my futilely. No other visitor would have my flesh straining against the metal currently caging my sex. And then he actually has a whole paragraph about it, but I just excerpted one sentence that he currently has his in a cage because he can't stop dreaming about his ex-boyfriend. And then in chapter 4, when Elijah is there, we get the fourth invocation of the cage, which is my tries to swell. That's similar to like the blood futilely rushing. And so after that point, I just, for every chapter, I had two bullet points in it. One was called triplets, and I would put in all of the triplets that are in that chapter. And then the second was just cage, and I put tick marks. I think that the cage is mentioned more than 40 times. I think it's 41 times across this entire book. There's only 55 chapters, so it's almost once per chapter. And I mentioned that like kind of around the halfway point, I think it's really actually like chapter 36. He's not in the cage anymore. And it's like, this is does this work? Does this not work? I think that's very subjective. But Aiden needed the cage at the beginning of the book because he thought he thought he did. Just in the same way that he needed the monastery at the beginning of the book because he thought he did. He thought he needed more. He thought he needed to go to Ireland. That he hadn't overcome all these things with Elijah. And the reason is because he has this sort of mistaken belief that it's Catholic liturgy and the catechism and all, like everything to do with Catholicism in the monastery that is what he needed to survive. But it's not. It is over the course of this journey that he realizes through his sexual explorations with Elijah and his discussions with Father Jordan and learning about how like the Trappist monks in France kind of like bend the rules, that there is a space for him where he can have his spirituality and Elijah, which means he doesn't need the cage anymore, which and he doesn't need the monastery anymore. And actually, interestingly, I think that so like the cage does come from their previous sex life, that they used it in like a fun way, and now it's become this like system of control or like a self-punishment for him. Not dissimilar to his faith, where it's like he did it kind of passively when he was part of the family, and now it's become like self-punishment. And then at the end, man, it's got to be in there. I would be shocked if it isn't in there somewhere, but actually I'm trying, it's not in my notes. I would imagine that they would use the cage again. There is one cage reference at the very end of the book. It's at the very end of chapter 55. I didn't have the exact thing he said, but he was thinking like, I'm so glad I don't wear the cage anymore. But he means just like out in the world. I would imagine that just like becoming an oblate at Mount Sergius, just like being able to use his faith when and how he needs it, he also can use the cage when and as he needs it, right? So the cage is this like actual physical manifestation of the spiritual journey that Aiden goes on. But that doesn't have a lot to do with like queer male sexuality. I'll just put that out there. Like that is a literary device. And most people don't use chastity cages because they are trying to like permanently deny, because they're like they've sworn a vow of chastity. So like, what do I think about that? I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's unusual, but it's like, I see what she's doing there, right? Like I see what's going on there, but it's not, since it's such I hope people understand when I say unusual, I don't mean that it's like, oh, chastity, like caging yourself, that's weird. It's just like not typical. It's not like something everybody does. It's not like if you polled 1,000 randomly sampled queer men and asked them like, do you use cages as part of your like sexual repertoire? I think you'd get a fairly low percentage back from that. It is like this unusual, non-typical thing that is not, and it's also like not directly related to being queer, right? Like straight people use cages. It is related to sexuality. So I'm talking about it in the like queer men and sexuality section, but it's like I don't think it particularly has a lot to do with Aiden being queer. And that kind of, goes back to my first point where I'm just struggling to see like why, there's just like not a lot in this book where it's essential that either of these guys are queer. There are a few things. So here's one. Thinking about the kind of extravagant flights that Aiden would pay for, where he'd be like, I want to get a croissant. Let's go to Paris. And they would just hop on a plane and go to Paris. Aiden thinks most of our long flights were spent trying to figure out how we could walk around on the plane without arousing suspicion from flight attendants or any nearby homophobes. Now, like, at least he's thinking about that. But, would those nearby homophobes be fine with it if straight people were walking around? I don't know. I mean, like, I think that he is expressing something that I think most queer people experience if you are visibly in a queer relationship, which is the eyes that you get on you. So that's like one thing. It's thin team. I only have two other bullet points that are even like tangentially related to queerness. Aiden thinks, and maybe I was careless even before that, years before, when I was in high school and college and romping around like a puppy, goading and teasing him whenever I saw him with Sean, desperate for him to see me as something other than Sean's little brother for reasons I didn't entirely understand at the time. This is something that when you're doing coming out stories, like awakening stories, I always like am on the hunt for this kind of thought from the character who has an awakening, which is generally, not always, but generally, if you have, like, whenever you have an awakening, even if it's during puberty, but like, especially if it's a little bit later, you probably had little crushes and you didn't know what they were, or you denied what they were. And that's what was happening here. And so I think that that's like, we are drawn to what we like. So Aiden was drawn to Elijah in his youth and wanted to be like disrobed around him. Like both of them think about this time when Aiden was like 19 years old and had like a very hot, sexy body that it was age appropriate, whatever, or 18 or 19. Like, he was just past. All these books are at pains to like have the characters be as young as possible, but not too young. There's this really weird thing in Sinner. I was like, "Ugh, I don't like it at all. Where Zenny is 21 and Sean is like 36. They're already like a huge gap. We get reminded of when she was 7 and he was like a 20-year-old. But like they have a sexual encounter where she's like, what if I was 17? And I'm like, no, get it out of here. No, why'd you put that in here? I don't want that. Ugh. And it's like, I don't want to hear any bullshit in the comments of like, oh, well, what difference? Well, in my country, 16 is the year of like, whatever, man. It's like, it's this like, it's putting that youth and that like boundary of what is acceptable like on a pedestal and kind of like making like a little fetish of that. And I don't think that there's necessarily anything bad about that. But it is, I don't like it. But and that happened here too, where it's like, oh yeah, he was age appropriate enough for me to be lusting after him. But like Aiden didn't know what he was doing, or he knew and he didn't want to know. It doesn't, like that's that we probably could have had more of that. But that is at least one thing. That's another thing that's kind of about queer male sexuality. And then the final thing I have is like the earliest thing, and this also doesn't come up very frequently. This is about like queerness in the church. Even though it chafes a little, knowing that by official church doctrine, queer Catholics are only considered fully Catholic if they're celibate. I'm participating in that doctrine, even if it's only incidentally, and I'm not entirely sure what to do about that. I've chosen celibacy because it's part of consecrating my entire self to the God who brought me back to life. But the idea that this is the only way a queer person can know God in this life, and after this life too, seems more about post-Reformation politics than divine inspiration to me. So, and then I don't have the note in here, but I did mention in the recap that this is going to be kind of a long video, huh? That Aiden also has the thought that he's in Lexapro when he thinks about this, that he likes that being a monk among other monks, him amongst his brothers, they're on a level playing field with regards to W/R/T sex. None of them can have it. So he has no problem being out to them because the only issue by church doctrine is acting on your queer desires, your homosexual desires. And then other than the fact that it's two guys with dicks doing stuff with each other, that's kind of it. In fact, all of the brothers of Mount Sergius are so cool with Aiden that when he gets married, there are more. The largest single group of people at Aiden and Elijah's wedding are brothers from Mount Sergius. So yeah, I'm just kind of my flabber is gasted about how little this book seems to be about queerness and queer men and being a gay or a bisexual man. Because, and then getting into my other like kind of major point of criticism, which I mentioned at the very top of the video, and it's about Christianity and faith. Aiden is at Mount Sergius not because he has faith. And that's what I want to turn to next. Well, actually, let's wait. I'm going to make you be patient just like Aiden and Elijah were. I think that stands to be the last section of this video. So let's go into two other sections. One, I've got like weird or overwritten or just kind of like unusual passages that I highlighted. And then I do have a good stuff section. It is, I'm so sorry if you really like this book, but it is a lot shorter than a lot of the other good stuff sections that I've had. But we'll close with that. So it's like you'll get the stuff I didn't love so much first, and then we'll talk about things that I did like. I want to make it clear that this is unusual or overwritten passages, that some of them are bad, I think, but some of them I'm just sort of like, that's interesting. Maybe not in a great way. So one of the first descriptions of Aiden is Aiden Bell was all play, all energy, M dash, frisky, kinky, frenetic, kinetic. I think, I mentioned this at the beginning as well. I think that Simone was she was really going for something with the writing style of this book. I'll talk about the triplets here. I don't think they're weird or bad necessarily, but they are very notable. And this kind of writing is also very notable too. Frisky, kinky, frenetic, kinetic, FK, FK, right? Like this is like, this could easily go in the good stuff section, right? Like this one sentence, Aiden Bell was all play, comma, all energy. Frisky, kinky, frenetic, kinetic. Play, frisky and kinky. Energy, frenetic, kinetic. So I just feel like she worked on that sentence for a long time. This is my key problem with this. And I'm going to attribute it even if this person didn't want me to. Well, no, I'm not going to attribute it. I immediately take it back. An author who I'm close with. We were DMing not about this book in particular, but about third person versus first person books. And I was talking about how I often don't like it when a first person narration doesn't seem to match the character. And that is the main issue that I have with a lot of this, which is Aiden Bell doesn't seem to be like the kind of person that would be having these thoughts exactly. And what this author said was, yeah, sometimes it feels like it's first person with a hat on, that the author is sneaking third person narrative description into the thoughts of the POV character, but they want it to be first person POV for other reasons, right? They want the immediacy of that. They want to be able to do the like I kinds of sentences. And when I read a sentence like this that feels like it was crafted, like someone worked on, right? Aiden Bell was all play, all energy, frisky, kinky, frenetic, kinetic. That kind of takes me out of it a little bit when it's not actually a third person narrative. And then here's another one of these sentences, and I like this would be a 10-hour. This would be me reading the whole book if I noted every sentence that felt like really worked on. But this is another one that came like really soon after. Which is, I can't stop the tender shoots and slender seeking roots of him. Simone also uses consonants and assonance, right? Alliteration through this, like tender shoots and slender seeking roots of him, like that S sound, right? Like, there's this famous story called The Balloon, which, there's lots of, S consonants in it. It's supposed to make you like think of the sound of the balloon getting blown up, right? Like Aiden is thinking of how Elijah is creeping into like his soul, and it's like it's that we are getting both the visual metaphor of it and then like the something that's more tactile. And I think that, again, like this could easily also be in the good stuff section, where it's like a sentence like this that's supposed to make us think of that. I can't stop the tender shoots and slender seeking roots of him, like how he's like getting into you. That I think is what, like, how did I put it? That it's that Simone is kind of like wanting us to recall the stained glass windows and the censer, the stuff of Catholicism, the stuff of religion. The words are kind of like that. So, right, is it like bad or is it good? I don't think I don't think it's bad or good. It's just very notable, and I just feel like it probably would have worked better if it wasn't in Aiden's head. Aiden, the kind of person who says, and so with a very constrained supply, the demand for their beer was, in a word, nutballs. It's just so incongruous. The tender shoots and slender seeking roots of him is also thinking like this beer is nutballs. And then she doesn't repeat herself all that much, although she does use the word vocation throughout this entire series like a lot. It's very notable that she calls what everyone is doing their vocation. But she does use certain constructions, so like this is one. The perfect moment which feels holier than prayer and deeper than contemplation. I have in my notes that this is something this particular construction she uses a lot. Something is Xer than P and Yer than Q. Holier than prayer and deeper than contemplation. She uses that kind of a lot. And then there's all the triplets, right? I think one of the first ones I noted was I nod and I nod and I nod because what else can I do? I cannot speak. I cannot speak. There are frequent word repetitions, but it's the triplets that are extraordinarily present throughout this story. So here are just a few of them. Aiden's desire for Elijah, had built and built and built for years and years. Fresh from that oil black night in the farmhouse when there was nothing, nothing, nothing crawling along my skin. And this restlessness, maybe it's proof that I need something harder, harsher, meaner. So that's not repeating a word, but we get a triplet anyway. Harder, harsher, meaner. A little bit later, Aiden thinks, I wanted to find Elijah and say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Up and I'm back and I'm sorry. Or maybe he's mirroring my expression, which I know has to betray everything that I crave, I dream, I love, that I'm a garden of him to this day. Oh, and then here's like another like clangy thing, right? So it's like there's well, you know, maybe it's like maybe this is the best book ever written, right? Like it's like the profound and the profane or whatever. So here's an interaction between Aiden and Elijah. There's no need for that, Elijah says. I'm perfectly comfortable having you around. And then Aiden thinks, right, because I'm not just an X, I'm a monk X. That should be the safest X who ever X'd. It just, that doesn't go so much with that I crave, I dream, I love, that I'm a garden of him to this day. More triplets. Elijah's not at dinner at Compline, and I know I have to apologize to him. I have to own up to what I did, and it's not only contrition driving me to his cell door after prayers. I know that. So this is like a compound triplet, right? So it's like Elijah's not at dinner at Compline, and I know I have to apologize to him. I have to own up to what I did. And it's not only contrition driving me to his cell door after prayers. I know that. It's those three things. But then inside of that, we get, I have to own up to what I did and dash, and dash, and it's not only contrition, right? We get this like, those, I'm not going to go through it. There's tons more. I'm not going to go through every one of those, but I think that's kind of like creating, like a ritual structure for the sentences of this book. It makes it a little ritualized. And again, I think that this is, it's not bad. It could be quite good. It's quite notable. So like, I guess it's kind of hard for me to describe. Like it didn't, I guess what I'm saying is this didn't work for me, but I could absolutely see how it could work for someone else. I think that someone listening to this section could be like, I want to read this book. I want to see how this works. And if you can be down for if you can be down for characters going through this and you're not looking for like that faith experience, I think that, you know, that this might work pretty well for you. But we'll get back to that faith experience here at the end. Before that, we'll just like one last detour into the good stuff. It's not very long. Sorry. All right. So things that I noted as good. Why don't you give Brother Titus his rubber ball back? Abbott says. All the monks at Mount Sergius are bouncing on like big rubber bouncy balls. His eyes crinkling around the corners. And come to my office for a moment. I can't even bear to look up into Elijah's face as I pick up the ball by the handle and hand it to Brother Titus as solemnly as someone handing off a briefcase with nuclear codes inside. That's a funny image, right? Like Aiden is bouncing on a big bouncy ball and he's not expecting Elijah, and Elijah's there, and then he's like, and it's like that's fun. That's funny. Surely Brother Connor told him that my surprise visitor last month was actually my ex. Surely Brother Connor told him I'm still in love with him. But then again, maybe not. As gossipy as monks can be about goings on, sometimes we're also really good at respecting confidences. And I could see Brother Connor doing exactly that, which normally would be great. So wonderful. I love what good loyal friends I have. That's like kind of a... If the whole book, like Sinner, had been that kind of narration, I think it would have landed a lot better for me. Just this kind of like racing thoughts kind of thing, and not like so wide aperture on like the awesome beauty of the world. For the first time in years, our hands are pressed together, and even with a wafer of homemade soap between us, even with his palm to the top of my hand and my own palm pressed against the old terry cloth, I still feel his touch like I'd feel a tongue of fire licking my skin. That's a nice sentence. And like it's worked, but it doesn't feel overworked to me exactly. And there's like notable things on it that are like reminiscent of religious practice for Aiden. So, he describes the homemade soap as a wafer, like a communion wafer. The palm of Elijah's hand is on top of his hand. He describes the tongue of fire, that like the touch feels like a tongue of fire licking at his skin. I think that all just like recalls various religious imagery in a nice way in this non-religious circumstance, right? It's like that's the whole journey that Aiden is going to go on. This next one is Aiden's a little bit drunk. While Elijah and Jamie are at Mount Sergius. A few of the glasses are mine on account of the impromptu drinking game I invented, which is called Drink Whenever Watching Your Ex-Boyfriend with His Fiancée Makes You Feel Sad. Why bend over a hot stove when you can bend over for your hot boyfriend instead? Why indeed? Why indeed? Aiden is thinking about, so I think Aiden is a Benedictine monk, maybe, but he's not a Trappist, and he wears black robes, and Trappists wear white. And he thinks, and none of their white robes were spattered with beer or cheese soup or anything. How? And the how has 3 question marks. How? I just was like, oh, I love the more of that, more of the personality. There's not a lot of personality in religious contemplation, and there's a lot of that in this book. And it's not that religious. I promise we'll get there in just a few more minutes. Sean, when Aiden reveals what's going on with him and Elijah, says that he's going to tell Tyler. I'm telling him you fell off the dick wagon so hard you left a dent in the road. And then this final good stuff thing, this is an interaction between Aiden and Jamie. I don't want you to be unhappy either, I tell him, even though you're aggressively pleasant and handsome and it makes me feel like a gargoyle. He laughs again. If you really were a gargoyle, it would have made the last 2 years of my life a lot easier. Unless I was a sexy gargoyle, like from the show, Gargoyles. A lot of monster romance people had awakenings from the show, so I think it's a funny run of sentences, unless I was a sexy gargoyle, like from the show, Gargoyles. But also, people like that show. All right, the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I don't know how long this will take, is the whole faith thing. And I had like a text message from Father Jordan at 3:30 in the morning. I had one bullet point that I literally is in a section by itself that says, I don't know what to do with these yet. Here's the quotation. Monks aren't supposed to beat themselves off, period. And while only I would know, I would still know. I would know that I was weak, that I caved to a gratification that helps no one else, that doesn't even help me. The point of celibacy is to sublimate sexual energy altogether, to transform ourselves. And if we feed our lusts by masturbating every time we feel like it, then that transformation is incomplete. I don't want an incomplete transformation. I came here to be changed utterly and entirely. It turns out that, not unlike that text message from Father Jordan, that is maybe one of the most important lines in the book, and it has to do with why Aiden is at the monastery and how it has nothing to do with Jesus Christ dying on the cross for our sins. Aiden, like Tyler, is using this religious practice for non-religious purposes. He used it as like a stand-in for therapy and medication before he was doing therapy and on medication. And when he thinks about the transformation that he needs, he isn't talking about a transformation that is related to the Christian faith. He's talking about something else. And do I have this line in here? There is another thing that is deeply related to this about religious practice being a vessel. I don't have the whole line, but it is in one of the last chapters. It's in the last Ireland chapter. After Elijah's left, Aiden thinks the only thing he has is prayer and Catholic ritual, which he sees as a container, and he describes it as a holy grail that he can pour all of his negative feelings into. When he is thinking about not confessing, that is bothersome to him because he's supposed to confess, because that's part of the ritual. He's not thinking about, like, this is damaging my soul, or this is not what God wants. Jesus Christ died for my sins and it washed me clean. And as I am accumulating these sins, I need to go and the priest that I confess to and the penance that they give me is not washing my soul free of these sins. It is the means through which I access the salvation of Jesus Christ. He does not think that. That is not what he's thinking. And that is because, in my analysis, he does not have faith. He does not believe in God the Father. Like, if you told him to recite, I'm not going to be able to do this from memory, the Apostles' Creed. If you asked him to recite the Apostles' Creed, I'm sure he could do it cold in a way that I can't, right? I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. On the third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From there he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. Amen. I'm sure he could recite that. I don't think he believes it. I think he believes that the ritual and the practice is what he needs, and that he is accessing something that is larger than him through that practice. But I don't think that it is faith. And this is maybe the most critical problem with both priest and saint for me, which is Tyler didn't have faith in God. Tyler was doing that job because he thought it was atonement for perceived failures with respect to his sister. And Aiden doesn't have faith. He has been being a monk because he thought, and it was true, that he needed it to survive. He needed, like, his depression. He was using this as self-medication and self-punishment. That he was punishing himself for, like, his perception of being just like a dirtbag, shitheel. But neither of them had faith. Neither of them, as far as I can tell, believed in God, believed in Jesus Christ. So, like, how hard is it to walk away from those things if you don't have any faith? Probably not that hard, especially when there are other things that you can do. Like, something that was, like, in my head so much was like, well, he could have, like, become a lobsterman. He could have, like, there's all kinds of ways that that Aiden could have walked away from his life. He chose this because the author wanted him to. Let's be real. And it turns out I didn't have a lot to say about this, but I will sneak it in here at the end because a friend that I was DMing about this and I were talking about it. Not only is there, like, there's, like, Catholic cosplay, particularly in priests, but there is an unusual amount of almost, like, Protestantism in this because Aiden doesn't seem to, like, believe in the catechism of the Catholic Church. There is so much individual, and Tyler, there's so much, like, individual faith, an individual personal relationship with God, and Bible reading, and like, this being so inwardly focused to me reads as, like, a very Protestant way of practicing Christianity, whereas, like, Catholicism is very communitarian. It's very, like, hierarchical, like something that someone who is a Catholic priest or became a Catholic monk, you would expect them to believe is in the apostolic succession, that they would believe, that they would have faith that God is real and that Jesus died for our sins, and that specifically as Catholics, that Peter was, in direct communion with Jesus Christ, and that Peter and the succession of bishops and the structure and the history of the Catholic Church carries on all of that and has all of Christ's authority within inside of it. And that's why you gotta do what the Pope tells you. And that's why you gotta do what the bishops tell you. That's why you, like, every little, like, detail of Catholic doctrine and the catechism, you gotta do it because it's all in this unbroken chain of things that goes all the way back to Jesus Christ. Do Tyler and Aiden believe that? Bullshit. They don't believe that. And Father Jordan, I don't know. Interesting character. Supposedly there's going to be a book about him, maybe. Will I continue reading these books? I guess now. I feel like I'm pot committed. I'm not going to do videos about all of them, certainly. But, like, I'll keep going. Why not? But, like, I now have the appropriate expectation settings for these books, which is they are not books about people having a confrontation with their faith and how to reconcile their faith with their sexuality. That's just not what they are. These are books about men who don't have faith, but who have religious and spiritual experiences anyway, and they come to learn that they were doing it the wrong way. If they believed in Catholic doctrine, these books wouldn't work at all because Aiden would have to deal with like the bare fact of like Catholic doctrine around queer people. Now there is like some progressive, certainly progressive like non-Catholic traditions around homosexuality, and I'm sure that there are some progressive Catholics who have a different understanding of queerness, and recent popes have started softening in very small ways the church's position on queer people and homosexuality. But we don't have to really deal with any of that because the men in these books, or in particular, like mostly Tyler and Aiden, they don't want to be Catholics who reconcile their Catholicism with sexuality. They are men who errantly thought that Catholicism had something for them, and they find out that it didn't, but that the thing, the like spiritual encounter was real, and that they can walk away from the church and still have that spiritual thing, that God thing. Tyler calls it the God thing. I think that there is something quite powerful there in that insight. And I think that if you are the kind of person who wants to live in a world where you can be yourself, and yourself is something that is rejected from certain mainstream religions, these are books where you can not like kind of in a cosplay way, kind of in like a psychologically safe dress up way, experience that idea of there can be the God thing and the sex thing, and maybe they're the same thing. And I've got to like tear this organized religious part away, but I'm not going to lose that after I do it. But I was expecting there to be that faith thing, that doctrine thing, that theological thing. And I didn't get that. And the books would be very different if Tyler had really believed, if Aiden had really believed. But I think that they could have been different in a very interesting way, maybe a more interesting way, if Aiden really believed that Jesus Christ was real and died for his sins, and somehow through the course of his experience with Elijah and people like Father Jordan, still believed that that happened, but that he can be with Elijah and it is good. I, like God, would have looked down on those books and have pronounced that it was good.
That's right!